153 years after the founding of the Universalist Church of America, in 1946, a newsletter called Theologically Speaking was launched upon the world. Its writers were multiple, their names probably unrecognizable to most people today: Gordon McKeeman, Albert Ziegler, Earl McKinney, Raymond Hopkins, David Cole, Frederick Harrison, Charles Vickery, Albert Harkins. They were all young Universalist ministers, classmates in the seminary at Tufts University. And the name they gave their group was the Humiliati, which is Italian for the humble ones, the humble ones. Newsletter after newsletter articulating their theological ideas was published, and the response from fellow Universalists was mixed. A certain Donald M. Morgan said, "Your publication struck me as a terrific blunder." But then an F.B. Bishop said this, "It is the first ray of hope I have seen for many a day. I had about made up my mind that the Universalist Church had completely sunk in the muck of appeasement. I hope we have some fight left in us as in the days of old when we made progress." And then from one Homer Jack, this: "We need some stimulating theological discussion in whatever direction." Already you can tell that what the writers of Thinking Theologically were trying to do was by no means humble. They had a big vision for what might be next for universalism. Definitely they were convinced that there needed to be a next, there needed to be a new chapter. Because by 1946, 153 years after the founding of the Universalist Church of America, there was widespread feeling that the faith was struggling, that it was languishing in apathy. Now, why is that? Because it had been so successful. That is why. Originally, the Universalist gospel that denied the existence of eternal hellfire and damnation and affirmed salvation for all was widely rejected. It was seen as of the devil. Proponents were seen as morally and psychologically defective, incapable of sound judgment, and therefore restricted from serving on juries. It's true. But by the latter part of the 19th century, the Universalist Church of America had grown by leaps and bounds, and it had become the 6th largest denomination in America. That is what happened to it. Even more success was that liberal and moderate Christian churches started to adopt universalism for themselves. Thus, by 1946, the Humiliati's concern for the future of universalism was quite legitimate. There is no virtue, they said, in maintaining a distinction where there is no difference. If other churches are preaching universalism, we are not justified in manufacturing small differences to support our seclusion. We are languishing in apathy, they said, because we have no up-to-date philosophy of religion to put into the minds of the people. Now, today I want to explore with you this up-to-date philosophy of religion which these Humiliati developed between 1946 and 1954, which they called new or emergent universalism. The symbol that you are looking at on the screen of an all-inclusive symbol with an off-centered cross, that was the symbol of this evolved faith. That is what they created to communicate emergent universalism. We're going to jump right in. We're going to see if what was up to date in the mid-20th century is up to date for us, where we are today. As a side note and a caveat, one way in which the Humiliati are decidedly not up to date for us today is in their usage, standard at the time, unfortunately so, for the word man to be used to represent all genders. I just want to acknowledge that. Please forgive them. Forgive them. When you hear man, they mean to refer to everyone. So we begin. For universalism to become new, the Humiliati believed, it must deeply claim what is original and radical in the old parts of it, specifically in the thought of a gentleman that we were introduced to last Sunday, Hosea Ballou. Here's how the Humiliati put it. They said, in a treatise of atonement, Hosea Ballou laid the foundation for a philosophy supporting our optimistic faith. We revere his memory and we ignore his basic teachings. We strive to maintain his optimism unsupported by his philosophy. We need to restudy the treatise for a revival of the force of our faith. Again, they said, a study of history of our universalist thought reveals that we have grown closer to the other churches by reason of our sustained retreat from the genius of our liberal gospel. You know, Abraham Lincoln once said that towering genius disdains a beaten path. It seeks regions hitherto unexplored. Well, that's what Hosea Ballou did for universalism. But universalism, said the Humiliati, well, they preferred the beaten path. They did. And now it was time to evolve or die. Time to stop retreating. Time to lean into the genius of Hosea Ballou. And that genius essentially had to do with his Unitarianism. His Unitarianism, 20 years before the Unitarian Church, or American Unitarian Association, 20 years before that association would be formed, here was a Universalist preaching Unitarianism. I just find that to be amazing. And his Unitarianism saw reality as having no fundamental divisions or gaps in it, no multiple Godheads, no Trinities, no God versus Satan. Ballou calls this universal benevolence and says, is it not wrong to make a separation where the Almighty does not? Is God not perfectly joined to all creation? Do we not live, move, and have our being in God? God is a divine animation, embracing all humanity. He says, I do not conceive that the agency of God's word is confined particularly to names, sects, denominations, people, or kingdoms. The word is everywhere. It is operating in some degree in all hearts. Are you starting to see why the Humiliati chose the all-inclusive circle to symbolize emergent universalism? Do you see that? Do you see how that's in there? And emergent universalism, it's just universalism that takes Hosea Ballou seriously. That's really all that is. No gaps or divisions in reality, one purposeful growing universe power by which all things are maintained and toward which all things are moving. It is Ballou's vision, Ballou's version of what the Christian mystic Hildegard of Bingen saw 700 years before him, back in the 12th century. I am that great and fiery force, sparkling in everything that lives, in shining of the river's course, in greening grass that glory gives. We are held in the loving arms of a universal benevolence. The great and fiery force is in all things, and it is in you, and it is in me. And we feel this most intimately in our impulses. Now notice I just called it and it because the Humiliati, they wanted to combine naturalism and theism and humanism together. They wanted to bring all of those together. The great and fiery force is not anything supernatural. And while, of course, you can call it God if you prefer, there are so many other ways to name this sacred reality. Call it spirit, call it the holy, call it the mystery, call it goddess, call it the cosmic dance of interrelatedness, but just call it. Name it. Know it. In us, we feel it as the natural impulse towards goodness and wholeness. God has a good intention in every volition of man, says Ballou, meaning that in every choice we make, we aim for some kind of good. And in that aiming, we feel God, or equally, we feel the desire for happiness. Ballou also said it like this: every individual always does what he deems best for himself at that moment. Now, I do not know where Ballou got this idea that no person willingly chooses to act in a way that they perceive will have absolutely no benefit to them. The first time I ever heard this was when I read Plato and encountered the amazing figure of Socrates advocating for and explaining this belief. Others would object, citing example after example of people doing really bad things. And Socrates never denied the existence of objective badness, that people can really do bad things. But he always affirms that if you look very carefully at each instance, there will always be a subjective, intuitive sense in that person's mind that the action is going to somehow help. Always. A person can even know intellectually that what they are about to do is objectively bad, but they're still going to do it because, again, there is this intuitive sense that the act is going to help in some way. It will relieve them of some kind of suffering, or it will benefit themselves in some positive way. This instinct is our natural morality, our natural spirituality, which God, says Ballou, puts in us. And it unfolds developmentally. Abraham Maslow the psychologist, was discovering this around the same time as the Humiliati were doing their work, although I do not know if the two ever kind of crossed paths. But I want to bring up Maslow here because it so beautifully illustrates how the great and fiery force that is within each of us wants us to grow and how we grow. Maslow talks about our hierarchy of needs, and at the base of our needs, we're talking about physiological needs: water, air, food, sleep. Unless these needs are met, you forget about going to the next level because, well, you're just dead, right? You just died. But if you can get your physiological needs met, you're going to focus on the next level, which involves safety needs. And when you meet those safety needs, you just naturally go up to the next level, the third level of the hierarchy, to social needs, for affection and love and belonging, for companionship, for acceptance, involvement in social and religious groups. That's the third level. Get those needs met, and naturally, you're going to start seeking your self-esteem needs, your needs for personal worth, social recognition, accomplishment. Meet those needs, and you go to the top of the hierarchy, as Maslow discovered. You focus on self-actualization, these needs that have to do with fulfilling personal potentials and integrity and authenticity and self-awareness and creativity. It just naturally unfolds one stage to the next. 5 levels. The great and fiery force within us wants us to rise to the very top and even go beyond the top, as Maslow was surprised to discover. For a time, Maslow thought that there were only 5 levels of development because, you know what, if you're self-actualizing and your self-esteem is high and your social needs are all fully met and you feel plenty safe and you've got all the water and air and food and sleep you need, I mean, that's a pretty good life, right? I mean, what the heck else do you need, right? But Maslow noticed something about people operating at the 5th level self-actualization level, that top level. He noticed something about this, strange stuff about this. These folks, many of them were engaged in quests for what could only be called spirituality. They sought out experiences of life-altering moments of love and understanding and happiness and bliss. They wanted to experience states of consciousness that transcend normal, ordinary human states. People would even compromise their needs lower on the hierarchy in order to meet this highest self-transcendence need. They would leave safe jobs. Tell me about, you've heard that before, right? They would leave safe marriages. Whatever was necessary to stay on the spiritual quest, to not be stuck in one's life. They would give up comfort and security for the quest. They would even lay down their lives for the quest. Maslow responded to this surprising discovery by adding yet another level to his hierarchy of needs. Level 6, the self-transcendence level. That is what is at the top of the top. And that is what the great and fiery force wants for all of us. For all of us. And you know what? We cannot choose otherwise. We cannot shut off the inner impulse that causes us to always seek out more, to always be more, to seek out what we at least think is best for us at any given moment. We are not free to do that, which takes us to what is perhaps most shocking about Hosea Ballou's genius vision and the vision of the Humiliati, their emergent universalism. Both of them reject the doctrine of free will. They reject the doctrine of free will. They say that humans are not fundamentally evil, but they also say that humans are not fundamentally neutral. They say humans are fundamentally good. So say the Humiliati, man is tied to the purpose of the universe that produced him and is impelled by that purpose always to act in the manner which appears best to him. He is not free to do evil. He is free only to do good as he sees it. But he must see it both intellectually and emotionally, since man does not act upon intellect alone. The argument takes us back to the all-inclusive circle image. The sacred is one cosmic force for growing towards higher and higher complexities and harmonies. It is a universal benevolence, and no one is left out of that circle. All people belong to that circle. But you know what? The orthodox teaching of freedom of the will, well, what that does is that introduces a gap in that scheme. An ability to choose what is wrong, and to do that with the full, honest, intellectual, and emotional conviction that there will be no benefit to no one, that represents nothing less than a force that opposes God. That shatters the all-inclusive circle. It shatters the unity of reality. The Humiliati, following Hosea Ballou, reject this again and again. The only life in man is the universe force. He grew out of its evolutions and is not free to move other than towards its purpose. It is exactly why they say that our confidence in the supreme worth of every human personality can be total, or as we today speak of it, the inherent worth and dignity of all people. It is why our confidence in this can be total. Sin is not the result of anything supernatural. Sin is not absolute. Sin is real. Mistakes are made from small to horrible, not because of the devil, but because people are ignorant of what truly lies in their genuine good, what will truly give them happiness. And this ignorance can be so layered and so seemingly stuck that it is horrifying. The ignorance can infect communities and infect nations, hint, hint, until problems are horrifyingly layered and seemingly stuck. But it is all ultimately, in the end, ignorance. And ignorance is solvable. This is a gospel not of hell, but of hope. That is what this is. And the church plays an integral role. The function of the church, says the Humiliati, is to educate men both intellectually and emotionally to be good. Humans are self-conflicted creatures. That is probably not the first time you've ever heard that. Humans are self-conflicted creatures. And the reason why is mankind always holds ideals intellectually that are beyond his present emotional bandwidth to make possible. Not until he becomes emotionally convinced, say the Humiliati, for these ideals that are inside his head, for him to act on them. This takes us straight to what we heard Taryn talk about just a moment ago, about the education that a congregation like this can bring into our world. Developing skills of empathy and compassion and resilience. We are an empathy school. Can I hear an amen? For that? That is beautiful. This world is a world of gun violence and rising sea levels and scarcity of resources and rampant greed, and there is an antidote, healing the ignorance. Healing the ignorance. Even the very worst of it that we see, it is just ignorance. No one stops being a child of God, no matter how ignorant you are, because you can't get rid of that ultimate deep impulse for the good, for doing good. And one more thing, and we need to seek out truth from wherever truth may come. That actually is where the Humiliati diverge with their honored Hosea Ballou. Ballou firmly believed that the Holy Scriptures of the Old and New Testament contain a revelation of the character of God and of the duty, interest, and final destination of humankind. But the Humiliati, well, think again of their distinctive symbol, the off-centered cross. That's telling you something right there, right? I mean, this is what this symbol stands for. This is their definition of it. The religion of the unities and the universals. That universalism is an important emphasis of religion for today. That universalism is found in the highest development in all the world's religions. That the universals transcend the partialisms of every religious faith, including Christianity. That Christianity has been an important step for us in reaching universalism. That universalism is a higher development than traditional Christianity. Now, it is true, you heard a moment ago, Ballou did once say that I do not conceive that the agency of God's word is confined particularly to names and sects and denominations, peoples, or kingdoms. The word is everywhere, he says, operating in some degree in all hearts, absolutely. But you know what? Jesus was still his go-to guy. Jesus was still his go-to guy. As for the Humiliati, they say, the plain fact we must face is that Jesus did not command slavish respect. His authority is not adequate. His religion is neither dynamic nor functional in this age. His personality can no longer dominate the educated, thinking person. Again, they say, if replacing the authority of Jesus with the authority of empirical reasoning is heresy, then heresy it must be. Let us build our faith squarely on the best of modern scholarship and human reasoning. Let reason and truth be our authority, not a semi-historical figure of the 1st century A.D. Boom! I mean, mic drop, right? Whoa! And they call themselves the humble ones, right? Whoa! Be that as it may. Our religion needed a shot in the arm back in the 40s and 50s, and it needs one right now too. It needs it now too. And it is always a good thing to revisit the vision of our geniuses. Of Father Hosea Ballou and of Mother Hildegard of Bingen, through whom God spoke and speaks to us today in this very room, in this very moment. And where I breathe, there is no death, and meadows glow with beauties rife. I am in all the Spirit's breath, the thundered word, For I am life.